In the barren desert of suffering, what do you do when you've lost everything? Job's wife, a woman forgotten by history, stood at the crossroads of despair and faith. Her untold story is not merely a whisper amid pain, but a roar of courage and redemption. Did she truly betray her faith when she urged Job to curse God? Or was it the beginning of a spiritual journey steeped in grace? Join us to uncover this gripping tale where divine justice and wisdom light the way through darkness. Subscribe to the channel to never miss the untold stories of women in the Bible, where faith always finds its light. Prepare for an emotional journey starting right now. In the ancient land of Uz, where the sun blazed like molten tiles scorching every corner of the vast desert, Miriam, the woman rarely named in sacred texts, took her first steps into the new day. Before her stretched a crimson tapestry of sand, dotted with hardy shrubs and flocks of migratory birds darting across the searing sky. As dawn bloomed, rays danced on the thatched roof, casting warm hues over golden fields of ripe wheat. It was a serene scene savored by Job's family, her husband, blessed by God's grace. Yet behind this veil of peace, Miriam was the silent commander. She was not just the shade cooling their sprawling home, but the beacon guiding each family member's heart. Her 10 children, from eldest to youngest, knew the warmth of her hands. Each morning she parted the curtains, watching them rise together amid the cheerful trills of wild birds. Then gently she portioned meals, instructing them in the etiquette of reverence before Job led them to worship, a solemn ritual forging an unwavering bond between humanity and the Almighty. Their home stood amid fields of barley flowing like golden silk, where sheep and cattle grazed lazily on tender grass. The herd symbolized not only wealth, but the diligent care and deep faith the Job family offered to God. Miriam, in a simple yet airy coarse dress, bustled from stables to fields, kitchen to the modest chapel behind the house. She tended every grain, every drop of milk, every child's heart, ensuring the household ran as smoothly as a flawless machine. Each afternoon, as the sun dipped westward, Miriam sat by the ancient well, her hands deftly drawing water, rinsing flax. The well's depths yielded cool water, as if carrying the earth's soothing breath. She glanced up at clouds swirling above, their strange shapes sometimes evoking God's outstretched hand. It was said that prayers at Uz's well brought blessings, and Miriam, though busy, stole brief moments to whisper to the Almighty, offering simple hopes, healthy children, thriving livestock, and a heart steadfast in faith. Then, like an unheralded fate, one morning the skies of Uz turned eerily dark. Thick clouds rolled in, smothering the radiant light, transforming the desert into a gray, rolling sea. The desert winds, usually dry and brisk, now whipped into violent whirlwinds, carrying dire news from distant horizons. Miriam rose abruptly in the courtyard, her sharp eyes tracking unfamiliar soldiers, their hands gripping the reins of Job's horses, now mere skeletons of bone and hide. A loyal servant who'd toiled beside Miriam since their lean days lay fallen in the sand, his wounds still bleeding. The ground trembled with 10 horrific cries. Her children had perished in last night's sandstorm, not one spared. A choked sob erupted from Miriam's mouth. She collapsed as if her soul had fled, clutching her headscarf, tears streaking her sun-weathered cheeks. Job, her steadfast husband with unyielding faith, knelt in the courtyard, hands clasped, murmuring ceaseless prayers. But Miriam, in that moment, felt her heart shatter, each shard piercing her chest. The peace of years, the splendor of wealth, even the faith she thought impervious to trials, all fragile as a spider's thread. She stared at the dust-choked sky, thinking, where is God when this pain fills every breath? The desert of Uz was no longer just a harsh land, but a symbol of her spiritual solitude and tribulation. The golden grains of sand, once warm, now stung like sharp needles, weighing each step. Miriam stood amid the ashes of her life, the winds howl in her ears like fate's curse. Gone was the cozy home, the gentle herds, the children's laughter. Only a vast emptiness remained, and a choked question without an answer. Yet, in the depths of despair, a faint ember flickered in Miriam's eyes. It wasn't the rote faith Job clung to, but a yearning to uncover a deeper meaning to life. She refused to succumb entirely. Though her legs faltered and her soul cracked, she resolved to hold fast to the wisdom and courage of a biblical woman. She knew the path ahead would be arduous, but it was the only way to hope's light. In the endless sea of sand, Miriam quietly gathered fragments of memory, broken toys, a daughter's silk scarf, a son's small water jug. She tucked them into a coarse cloth bag, carrying not material wealth, but the final lessons of her departed children's souls. Then she gazed toward the horizon, where the sky remained grim, and whispered, I will go on, for there's a call I must hear. That call rose from the depths of pain, guiding her into a new journey, a quest for divine justice and inner light. From here, the journey was no longer merely that of a suffering wife, but a hymn of courage, perseverance, and faith blooming amid a brutal desert. Miriam, though forgotten by history, would write her own saga, proving that even in the darkest shadows, a woman who dares to rise can ignite a horizon of hope. In the days following that initial agony, Miriam seemed to carry the entire desert in her heart, arid, lonely, and harsh, mirroring her soul as she watched her husband sit amid ashes, his body covered in festering sores. Job, the man she loved and admired, once a paragon of unwavering faith, now endured physical torment without a single complaint. Each morning, Miriam rose before dawn, passing through the silent house where Job's trembling feet struggled to crawl from bed. She knelt beside him, her shaking hand touching his bloodied skin, inhaling the stench of suffering, and silently praying for a miraculous reprieve. But no miracle came. Instead, the skies of Uz remained vast and mute, a cold mirror reflecting the couple's pain. Whenever desert winds blew, white sand swirled into the thatched hut, each tiny grain stinging Job's flesh like needles, drawing pained groans. Miriam, witnessing this, felt her chest's very fibers stretched to breaking. She couldn't fathom how the great Creator could let the righteous endure such extreme suffering. Miriam's pain wasn't just the loss of her children or her husband's physical torment. For a biblical woman whose heart always turned to God, the greatest trial was his challenging silence. She saw no sign of salvation. No angel came to comfort. No prophecy rang out to explain why divine justice let the righteous suffer. Only the desert wind howled around the hut, carrying a cold, defiant edge, as if mocking human patience's frailty. In a moment of utter despair, Miriam uttered the unthinkable. Curse God and die. Her voice cut through the heavy air, piercing Job's mind and shocking the nearby servants. It wasn't a betrayal of faith, but a cry from a shattered heart, laden with countless questions. Why must justice let the righteous suffer? Why isn't true faith enough to halt this pain? Her plea shook the desert, as if each grain of sand trembled in that silent moment. Around her neighbors, once admirers of the Job family's wealth and faith, now whispered, their eyes fixed on Miriam with disdain. They branded her weak, faithless, claiming only base souls dared defy the Almighty. Society's weight pressed on her shoulders, urging her to prove she was worthy of being Job's wife, worthy of the dignity tied to their family's honor. But Miriam, her heart scarred, couldn't stand idle under their judgment. She realized her faith wasn't a badge to flaunt, but a smoldering flame, shining brightest when forged through trials. One night, as darkness cloaked the desert, Miriam sank into exhausted sleep. In her dream, a hazy figure glided past like lightning across a starry sky. The figure said nothing, only nodded and pointed toward the distant desert. The dream vanished as swiftly as a dry gust, leaving her with a tangle of fear and hope. Was this a sign of redemption, or merely the delusion of a weary soul? Awakening, Miriam sat upright, peering through the small door's gap. Countless stars glittered on the inky sky, like the Almighty's distant gaze. She wondered, is God testing not just Job, but me? The question ignited a fire within, illuminating the hidden corners of a faith she'd thought unshakable. She stood at a crossroads. One path led to shattered faith, the other to a rugged but hopeful road, if she dared to keep trusting. Miriam's inner conflict became a catalyst for self-reflection. She couldn't abandon Job, though anger at fate tempted her to flee. She knew that leaving him in his darkest hour would be her final surrender, the desperate cry of a defeated soul. Instead, she chose to stay, if only to face the darkness with him, to share each tear and bear each pain. The next morning, as faint dawn crept through the thatch's gaps, Miriam knelt by the door, watching Job sit silently in the empty house. She drew a deep breath, vowing, I won't give up. I'll find the reason and strength to go on. The path ahead might hold more traps and perils, but she chose it, the path of a biblical woman, daring to confront pain, daring to question God, to find answers. In that moment, amid the arid desert and the wind's whistle through the door, Miriam felt a strange strength surge through her veins. It wasn't an instant miracle, but the start of a new journey, from despair to hope, from doubt to wisdom, from silence to a bold voice of faith. The untold story of Miriam was no longer just a saga of endurance, but proof of a latent inner power waiting to awaken in the deepest shadows. As her faith's flame flared, the desert of Uz would pulse with life, for hope was kindled from the very depths of a human heart. Miriam awoke in the fragile dawn, where the day's first rays slipped through leafy gaps, painting the desert sand with silken streaks of light. Gone was the children's laughter that once filled the house. Now only the wind's sigh through the dry well carried the scorched earth's heavy scent. Inside, Job knelt silently amid ashes, his gaunt silhouette faint against the dirt floor. Watching her husband, Miriam felt a cold current race down her spine, not just pity for his suffering, but a blazing inner wisdom igniting. She knew that lingering in grief would trap them in darkness. Instead, a single act, however small, could unlock the door to hope. As the first pilgrims passed the village gate, their footsteps and whispers of a legendary prophet flashed like lightning through Miriam's mind. They spoke of an old man, far beyond the horizon amid drought-cracked cliffs, wielding fervent prayers power. It was said that anyone approaching him with a pure heart would receive a blessing. Though faint, the rumor stirred Miriam awake. If she didn't set out, she'd not only lose the chance to save Job, but abandon the faith forged through darkest trials. So, she hastily packed brittle provisions, slung a simple cloth bag over her shoulder, and gently touched Job's arm. Under his anxious gaze, she offered a comforting smile, a farewell, but never a final goodbye. The sound of hoofbeats faded behind her as Miriam trudged into the desert, where golden dunes stretched like ocean waves to the horizon. Each step pulled her from the familiar house, from familial warmth, and into fierce trials. By noon, the desert sun blazed down, sweat rolling down her weathered cheeks. Tiny grains of sand lashed her skin like countless needles, squeezing her heart. Her eyes stung, but Miriam pressed on. Her resolve, tempered by determination, refused to yield to physical pain. That first night in the desert, she found a large rock, leaning against it and curling into a thin blanket. Amid the silent dark, the wind's wail through stone cracks whispered like the desert soul, both gentle and cold. Miriam closed her eyes, suppressing bodily pain and aching homesickness. She softly prayed, "Grant me strength to go on." But her prayer didn't echo to the heavens. Instead, she sank into weary sleep, letting dreams guide her into a realm of shadows and omens. In her dream, Miriam wandered an endless maze of white sand, directionless. A dim moon cast light, tracing cracked veins on the parched ground. She heard a faint whisper, unclear, sensing someone waiting at the maze's end. When she could walk no further, a faint glow appeared, like a torch leading the way. Miriam strained toward it, then heard a clear voice. "Rise, for divine justice is coming." The voice, warm as fire and frost, kindled a spark of hope in her heart. Awakening, Miriam felt as if she'd received a vow, a promise for a journey to save not just Job, but her own faith. The second day, the desert tested her further. She crossed towering sand ridges, each step threatening to swallow her resolve. Her legs wobbled, her throat parched beyond feeling. Yet Miriam dragged onward. As dusk neared, she found a small spring hidden among rocks, an unexpected blessing. Kneeling, she drank deeply, each gulp soothing her cracked lips. The water washed away despair's grit, reviving her with new vigor. She looked to the sunset sky, where clouds glowed pink, and whispered thanks. "You haven't forsaken me." In the days that followed, Miriam met wandering travelers, treasure seekers, ivory traders, pilgrims chasing miracles. They eyed her with pity, muttering judgments. "Foolish woman, leaving her dying husband to roam the desert." But Miriam didn't pause to explain. She knew that sometimes a journey of faith needed no defense, only steadfast steps forward. At last, after nights wrestling sand and wind, Miriam reached a barren mountain range where travelers said the prophet dwelt. A narrow, dim crevice beckoned, like a path into the earth's heart. She took a deep breath, clasped her hands, and entered. Her footsteps echoed dryly in the cold cave. Far ahead, a faint lamp flickered, sign of human presence. Drawing closer, she saw an old man, frail, his tattered cloak frayed, his snow-white hair framing eyes that shimmered like the sky's expanse, gazing at her with both kindness and piercing clarity. The old man smiled, asking nothing, only tapping her cloth bag lightly, as if confirming she was the one meant to come. Miriam knelt, unburdening her long-held weight, pouring out everything, her cry to curse God in anguish, the shame of neighbors' scorn, the exhaustion of the desert. Her voice trembled, but brimmed with sincerity and a thirst for redemption. When she finished, the old man looked into her sand-streaked, tearful eyes and said softly, "You've traveled far for answers. Now let divine justice reveal itself." He placed a hand on her forehead, warmth spreading through her, as if the desert's chill gave way to love's breath. On her return, a sudden sandstorm roared, daring to test her will one last time. But Miriam stood unshaken. She closed her eyes, deaf to the wind's howl, feeling an inner calm. Tilting her face upward, she whispered, "I trust you fight with me." When she opened her eyes, the storm had receded, restoring the desert's mystic stillness. Miriam smiled, knowing the miracle wasn't in changing the world, but in her transformation, from a fearful woman to a living hope. Returning to Uz, Miriam found Job resting on a straw mat under an ancient olive tree, his sores drying, his eyes glowing with strange serenity. She ran to him, kneeling and embracing him tightly. Job smiled, wordless, resting his frail hand on her shoulder as if saying, "I knew you wouldn't leave." They sat in silence, listening to rustling leaves and breathing the fresh dusk air. Miriam knew that, however grueling the path, faith and courage had led her to redemption's depths. The untold story of Miriam's action and growth ends here. But for every listener, it sparks a thought. Sometimes courage isn't changing the world in a flash, but walking steadfastly through darkness, finding light in the heart's depths. That is the true divine miracle, reserved for those who dare to believe, sacrifice, and press on to the end. Miriam entered the cave where the prophet dwelt, her steps weary yet brimming with hope. A dim oil lamp flickered on the stone walls, casting faint golden light that traced the rock's natural veins like time's wrinkles. There, the old prophet sat on a large boulder, his small frame dwarfed, but his eyes blazing with the desert sky's vastness. As Miriam recounted her grueling journey, her deepest pain, and her heartfelt plea, his eyes smiled kindly, as if seeing through every twist of her life. He closed his eyes as if attuned to the desert's breath, then opened them and spoke in a warm, steady voice. "God tests not only Job, but your courage and wisdom. You've borne more than a wife's burden, carrying your family's very return, and you will see grace fulfilled." His words surged through Miriam like a new life force, dispelling some of the exhaustion and doubt that had clung to her. Her heart stirred with faith in a miracle drawing near. Leaving the cave, Miriam carried the prophet's words like a map. On her return to Uz, the sky shifted, desert winds whipping into fiercer gusts. Sand swirled, obscuring sight and eroding each breath. A sudden sandstorm struck, an unannounced final test from the desert for one who dared traverse darkness. Miriam trembled, her limbs numb from sand lashing her skin. The wind's roar screamed surrender, but deep within, the prophet's words echoed, "Return, and you will see grace." She knew she couldn't stop. Step by step, she trudged through the desolate desert toward the familiar land where Job awaited. The storm grew wilder, wind tearing at her clothes, sand stinging her eyes, nose and mouth like countless needles. Miriam, drained, could barely stand. She knelt amid the desert, back against a rock, eyes shut tight against the sand. In her bleakest moment, she felt utterly alone, caught in nature's and fate's wrath. Her greatest fear surged. Has God forsaken us, leaving me to bear this torment? The cry rose from her soul, raw yet reverent, yearning for understanding and solace. Then, amid the wind's howl, a faint light pierced the thick sand veil. It blazed, yet its warmth was miraculous, not blinding but gentle, like a caring hand's touch. Miriam opened her eyes, rising instinctively, shielding her face as she gazed upward. In the sky, a voice resounded, formless yet brimming with power and love. I have seen your courage. Stand firm, for divine justice will not forsake the righteous. The voice held no reproach, only a declaration of presence and compassion. In that moment, Miriam understood every trial had a higher purpose: to forge faith and wisdom, to awaken hidden courage. The storm faded as if absorbed by the sacred light. Sand ceased its swirl, wind stilled, and the sky opened with clouds softly parting. Miriam stood, brushing sand from her hair and clothes, and took a deep breath. The air carried faith and peace, sweeping away doubt's remnants. She smiled, wiping tears from her eyes' corners, and walked with a transformed resolve, not a lost wanderer, but one guided by divine light. Returning to Uz, the village basked in gentle dusk. Job no longer knelt in ashes. Instead, he rested under an ancient olive tree, his body eased, sores drying. Servants gathered around, faces alight with awe and joy. Miriam ran to him, kneeling and placing her weathered hand on his. Job opened his eyes, gazing at her with love and gratitude. His faint smile said, "You're back. I knew you were brave." Miriam nodded, silent, letting their warm clasp and earnest eyes speak. In the days that followed, news of Job's miraculous recovery spread through Uz. Not only did his wounds heal, but the stolen herds returned by night, and children's laughter, once a faint dream, now echoed around their mother. Even the 10 lost children were honored with 10 clear water basins reflecting dawn's light, testifying to God's fidelity to innocent souls. Grace arrived unexpectedly, doubling their former blessings. Wealth, health, love, and above all, a faith refined and radiant. Miriam and Job rebuilt their life, not just with riches and children, but with profound faith and pure love. Miriam realized the greatest miracle wasn't healing flesh, but transforming hearts. She doubted, cried out in despair, but through her darkest moments, she unlocked an inner strength, courage, wisdom, and unyielding resolve. The story of Miriam, the woman scarcely named in the Bible, reveals a deep truth. Divine justice isn't mere restoration, but a journey from doubt to redemption, weakness to strength, darkness to light. Each trial, however brutal, is a chance to discover faith's and courage's potential. Miriam became not just a symbol of bravery, but proof that those who dare to believe, sacrifice, and endure trials will find boundless grace. As night fell on Uz once more, the oil lamp in Miriam's home flickered, its quiet glow reflecting in each family member's eyes. They gathered around a small altar, hands clasped in reverence, praying for a hopeful future. Miriam looked to the starry sky, once roiled by sandstorms, now clear and still. She smiled, her heart brimming with peace. Faith through any trial will find its light, and divine justice will never forsake the righteous. In that moment, even the harshest desert steps could become footprints of eternal open love. Miriam and Job returned to their old home with hearts both healed and strengthened. The thatched walls, once witnesses to sobbing cries, now echoed with the joyful laughter of newborn children and the hymns sung during family gatherings. Wealth may come and go, but the greatest treasure they gained was a faith forged in the fire of trials. Miriam, once seen as frail, emerged as a symbol of quiet courage and resilience. She understood that grace doesn't erase suffering, but grants the strength to rise above it, toward the light. Each brick, each olive branch in their small garden was tended by Miriam's steadfast hands. No longer faltering as when she first ventured into the desert, she moved with grace and precision. When morning dew glistened on leaves, dampening her dress, it wasn't just a sign of dawn, but a reminder of faith's ceaseless renewal. Job stood beside her, his silver hair untouched by the desert's wind, his eyes radiant with gratitude for a wife who walked with him through the valley of trials. By the ancient well, where Miriam once poured water in prayer, she now dipped a cup of milk she'd drawn herself. The trickling sound rang like a song of grace. She recalled her early days leaving the village for the prophet, when each step crushed her heart, each breath a battle between hope and despair. That journey taught her that sometimes we must leave safety to rediscover ourselves, to let faith's flame burn brighter. Under the olive tree's shade, Miriam shared her wondrous journey with her grandchildren. She hid neither the fear as sand lashed her face nor the bitter sweat of sleepless nights. Yet beneath it all lay trust in a higher power that understood and walked with her. The children listened, wide-eyed with awe and admiration. For Miriam, these stories weren't just lessons, but seeds of faith, teaching the next generation that even after falling, they could rise. In the quiet of dusk, Job and Miriam paused by their small altar. Candlelight flickered, casting a warm glow on their faces. They gave thanks for every hardship, every loss that had shaped hope's pearl. Job gently took Miriam's hand, a silent encouragement. We've overcome and will overcome more ahead. She answered with a confident smile, her sparkling eyes affirming, with faith, we fear nothing. Miriam's story doesn't end in ancient Uz, but transcends time, touching every heart today. In our modern lives, when facing loss, failure, or doubt, it's easy to sink into despair. But in the darkest moments, if we cling to faith and dare to step forward, we'll find light. That's the precious message Miriam leaves. Grace isn't distant. It arrives when we dare to believe, act, and rise after stumbling. Biblical women like Miriam teach us that wisdom lies not in perfection, but in healing wounds and holding hope. Her words weren't grand orations, but the quiet persuasion of lived experience. She didn't shrink from trials, but used courage to refine her faith. Let her story inspire you so when pain strikes, you can smile and say, I'm strong enough to overcome. And when you find faith's wings, don't forget to light a beacon of hope for others. Share your story, your prayers, your brave actions to sow faith in the world. For, like Miriam, each of us can be a lighthouse in the night, guiding lost souls to safe shores. The story of Job's wife is a light in darkness, proof that divine justice always finds the righteous. If these words stir your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch the next untold stories. Let Miriam and Job be your companions, steadying your steps on the journey of faith and hope. We'd love to hear your comments and shares. Tell us which moment in Miriam's story touched you most, or your own tale of overcoming trials. May God bless you and your families across America. See you in the next video. Hagar, the mother in the wilderness, another arduous yet grace-filled journey.